Breanna's joining us now live from Fort McMurray. And Breanna, truly everybody this morning seemed to think things might be all right.
They did, and it was sort of because overnight things grew, but it was still on hold. The wind was going to cooperate today. That's what we were expecting, that it would keep pushing west, so away from city limits. That obviously has not happened. Right behind me, I don't know if you can see, but there's a building. It's a brown building. It's kind of stacked. We've seen now 3 helicopters go and dump water. That's because it's the Jubilee Center. It is the government center here in the city of Fort McMurray. Every inch of the brush around us has been burned. We are seeing trees completely scorched. We're seeing that campground completely gone on both sides of this highway. So that is obviously why they closed that highway for a portion of time, because flames must have just been licking the road on either side. So we're in the community of Beacon Hill, and you can see behind me there is almost nothing left. We have been hearing from fire officials that 80% of homes were lost in this community. We have yet to come across the 20% that has not been lost. It is completely leveled. We're seeing still running water. It's amazing to see just the sheer devastation here.
So Breanna Karstens-Smith is live at the local airport. And Breanna, we hear things are just changing rapidly.
Absolutely, Sinjin. You can probably hear the air traffic behind me and see by my hair just how quickly these winds are blowing, not helping firefighting efforts at all. We're also seeing ash flying in the air. Today, we learned that the military will be sending 3 Griffin helicopters to the area to help with efforts, extra resources that are so desperately needed right now. There is lightning in the forecast for the area for the next few days, with tinder dry conditions and firefighters already stretched thin. That is the last thing crews here want. Bev?
CTV's Breanna Karstens-Smith near Williams Lake, BC.
Here at the 50-mile site, though, things are much worse. This used to be a lunchroom. Fire has totally destroyed it. On this side, a shop where hundreds of tools were, now completely ash. This crane no longer usable for business. But worst of all, in the very middle, there were 4 homes ready to go out to customers, now completely gone. This is Justin Trudeau's 4th time participating in Vancouver Pride, his 2nd as Prime Minister. And while there is a celebratory mood here, there are also issues to be talked about. Aaron, Joel, this year the city received transportation funding from both the federal and provincial governments for LRT and Yellowhead Trail improvements. The mayor says he has reason to believe more transportation funding is coming in the new year, but he also hopes affordable housing units move ahead.
CTV's Breanna Karstens-Smith is live near the highway. Breanna, there were more than 100 people involved in this crash.
And several vehicles, including 2 Greyhound buses. We know that they were both headed for Vancouver and had a lot of passengers on them. There were also 2 semis involved in this crash and several other vehicles, including some SUVs. So as you said, more than 130 people involved in this. And we've been speaking with many of those people involved. They say that this was a cascade effect, a chain reaction crash, and they just had to brace themselves to be hit over and over again. That video is from inside one of the Greyhound buses. The crash happened just before 9 last night north of Hope near Othello Road. Drive BC had put out a travel advisory for the stretch earlier, warning of slippery, snowy conditions. Witnesses say trucks had stopped around a curve and were blocking the road. The other vehicles, including those Greyhounds, came around the icy corner and couldn't avoid smashing into one another. In all, 29 people were rushed to hospital in conditions ranging from stable to critical. At least 1 person was trapped and had to be rescued using the jaws of life. 136 people were uninjured, but many of them were stuck for hours.
No, we just had to stay still because we were teetering. We were starting to teeter, so we were just told to sit and stay put.
Yeah, when I looked up, there was a jackknife semi, and the back truck, the back trailer part was sort of pinning a vehicle underneath it. It was really a mess of vehicles. I was just concerned about people's safety.
Breanna, just a major wreckage there. What's the status of the highway right now in terms of cleanup?
They've got all the debris off the highway itself. There are still vehicles, including that one Greyhound bus that is overturned in the ditch. But it looks as though they are getting ready to prepare to open the southbound lanes. Drive BC had tweeted that they were estimating around 8 o'clock. We have seen a couple vehicles come down, but we're not sure whether they were just stuck at the end of that crash site or whether the highway is indeed open. We do know that the northbound lanes are open at this hour. We were driving them this morning, and it is slippery. We're still waiting on official word for the southbound lanes, but looks like they could be opening quite soon here.
Our coverage begins with CTV's Breanna Karstens-Smith, one of the first reporters on the scene when the fire started and still there today.
This was one of the first areas that was hit.
The tour of Fort McMurray begins where flames first rushed in, where the fire they call the Beast breached the town.
We're in a place called Beacon Hill right now. Unfortunately, not that much left of it.
The neighborhood is more than half gone. It is the same in the streets up the hill. This wildfire has rewritten the book, says the fire chief, unprecedented in the path it traveled and the destruction it caused.
It jumped the Athabasca River, which is 120 feet wide. So this was a beast. It was an animal.
Just to show you the vast impact of this, there are dozens of media on this bus, and as we turned the corner, it went silent, and you could hear people say, "Oh my God," the impact of this just incredibly, incredibly hard to take. Premier Rachel Nolley got a first-hand look.
I will say that I was very much struck by the power of the devastation of the fire. It was really quite overwhelming in some spots.
But among heart-wrenching images, some hope, and it lies in downtown Fort McMurray. That is still standing. The hospital, fire station, and city hall were saved. The work of heroes, says the chief of firefighters who managed to hold the line, putting up a 12-hour battle here.
If that fire had got down into the downtown, we would have lost the downtown area.
In other spots, the fire devoured with no rhyme, no reason. On one side here, there are apartments reduced to ash, cars to carcasses. But just across the street, intact homes, businesses, schools.
I saw our parks actually that had perfectly viable swings and slides and the things that our children will expect when they come home.
And this town, say officials, is still home.
We're ready for the future, and when we get you back, we can build the future together. Thank you very much.
Breanna Karstens-Smith inside Fort Mac today. Now, I spoke to Breanna when she was outside the fire zone about being back on that same street 1 week later.
It was almost unrecognizable. We drove in and a lot of it was scorched earth, units, buildings that had no longer been there. As we drove to the site where we were standing last Tuesday when the fire came into the city, it was an emotional and a remarkable moment. As we stood in the same field that we were standing in last Tuesday, we had watched the flames come into the city and start to ignite trees and grass. Today it was a much different picture. Green grass, some houses still standing, and then some that were no longer there.
So random. Breanna, thank you. Excellent reporting this week.